first thing I wanted to say was that so we are organizing this seminar together with, so I am organizing it with Michał Krzykawski. So we are both working in philosophy. I'm working in philosophy in Paris. Michał is working in philosophy in Katowice in Poland. And we are also organizing this seminar with Chiara Giacardi and Mauro Magatti, who are both working in sociology and economy in Milano, and with Gaël Giraud, who is working in economy and theology also in Georgetown, so in the environmental justice program. And we are also organizing it with Daniel Ross, who should be here next time. He was very sorry he cannot be here today because he had to wake up very early tomorrow morning, and it is very late in Australia. So Daniel Ross is also working in philosophy around Bernard Stiegler's philosophy. So the aim of the very general aim of this seminar is the common conviction that we had was the conviction that the question of ecology and the question of technology cannot be separated today, and especially in the current context, which is at the same time the context of the Anthropocene, so the context of an ecological crisis or an ecological collapse, as some says. And it is also characterized, our context, by a massive digitalization of everyday life and by a kind of new industrial revolution. And of course, these two phenomena cannot be dissociated from one another. So the aim of this seminar was to try to cross the different fields of research about these two questions. So the field of environmental or sustainability studies and environmental economy on one side, and the field of philosophy of technology on the other side. And so we wanted it to be transdisciplinary because first, because if we want to transform the economy today, and if we want to change our main economic model, then we have to organize a kind of dialogue between economy and other sciences, such as human sciences, natural sciences, and science and technology studies, philosophy, and all these kind of reflections in order to make economy become a transdisciplinary field in a way. And also the second reason why we really wanted it to be transdisciplinary is also because we believe that the current crisis, let's say, is linked with an epistemological question, which is the question of entropy. And this question is a transdisciplinary question. It cannot be reduced to just one field of research. And it is also a question which is a big debate, a big controversy, which is not solved at all for the moment. We could say about entropy now, what Kant was saying about metaphysics a few centuries ago, that it is like a battlefield where there is no really any certitudes, there is lots of confusions, there is lots of misunderstandings. And what we wanted to do was to have different kind of points of view on this question of entropy, and to have an interscientific or a transdisciplinary reflections on this topic. So I don't develop more on this question now, but maybe Michał will say a word about that in his presentation. So today we are going to focus on the question of contributory economy in the context of the Anthropocene. And so Michał will start with his presentation about the Anthropocene and the technosphere, and he will present this situation. And then I will focus more on the question of contributory economy, and especially on the question of work. And okay, so I think we can start now. Michał, I'll let you speak.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so first of all, I am very happy to open this seminar series, the scope of which is very promising. And I would like to thank all speakers who have accepted our invitation, as well as all friends and colleagues with whom we came up with the idea of organizing this event. Working and sharing ideas with you is very inspiring for me. So thank you very much. What I'm going to talk about are two concepts, the Anthropocene and the technosphere. My talk is a kind of an extension of the chapter titled Challenging the Anthropocene, What Should We Do with Our Entropies, co-authored with Anne and Gaël for a collective book, The Anthropocenes, the Glossary for Reworking the Wound, which is forthcoming. I'll try to explain these two concepts, the Anthropocene and the technosphere, as introduced by philosopher Bernard Stiegler and geologist Peter Huff, respectively. By doing so, I'd like to suggest how we can, perhaps why we should link Stiegler's take on the Anthropocene as an Anthropocene to the meaning of the Anthropocene as described by Earth system science. Such a link, such a combination is not free from theoretical and methodological difficulties related to the question of datation, methods of inquiry, among others. I'd like to test whether these difficulties can be overcome, especially with a view to open a discussion of an economy to come, because this is, I think, this might be our common preoccupation, our different backgrounds notwithstanding. So in his late writings, Bernard Stiegler attempts to describe the Anthropocene as an Anthropocene. His central claim is that what characterizes the Anthropocene is a process of massive production of entropy in all its forms. Physical entropy, which means the dispersal of minerals and the irreversible degradation of energy concentrated in deposits into heat. Biological entropy, which is, of course, biodiversity loss. And informational entropy, which means the reduction of knowledge to information, the incalculable to the calculable. Moreover, Stiegler often points out that this informational entropy gives rise to negative effects that can be defined as psychosocial entropy. In this respect, he also speaks of dissociation in the psychological meaning of this term, and consequently dissociety and disindividuation. On the one hand, he tends to show how these negative effects that can be termed entropic effects are produced in computational capitalism, that is the one using automated calculations to exercise algorithmic control of all aspects of life. And on the other hand, he suggests that these psychosocial issues related to computational capitalism cannot be separated from ecological issues related to the Anthropocene. Put simply, it is important not to separate issues related to the energetic transition from those related to the digital transition. Therefore, the crucial task is to elaborate a theoretically cogent and transversal approach to entropy produced in the economic process in order to embrace all these issues. In Stiegler's view, the Anthropocene begins with the advent of industrial capitalism. On the one hand, it is related to the discovery of entropy by Sadi Carnot investigating work done by heat engines, especially with a view to optimize their functioning. On the other hand, Industrial Revolution is a moment when techniques translate into a tendency toward an incremental automation. In the Anthropocene, what becomes the main criterion is calculation prevailing over every other criteria of decision-making. This criterion, which substitutes the calculable to the rational, paves the way to multiple forms of economic extractivism, especially by means of technology, or to put it as philosopher Gilbert Simondon, through a vicious usage of technical activity. Earth system scientists define the Anthropocene and its beginning on the basis of different criteria. Referring to stratigraphic measurements, they argued that the Anthropocene is different from the Holocene, which means that we have entered a new epoch on the geological timescale, because the anthropogenic impact on the whole Earth system is incomparably higher than in an early Anthropocene's level some thousands of years ago, and at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, at the beginning of 19th century. Members of the Anthropocene Working Group agreed that the beginning of the Anthropocene should be located in the mid-20th, drawing upon current evidence. Soil nitrogen and phosphorus depletion, anthropogenic changes in the global nitrogenic cycle, ocean acidification due to the uptake of carbon dioxide from Earth's atmosphere, and high concentration of carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere. Geologist Cliff Hamilton and philosopher Jacques Greenwald, who is incidentally the translator of Georgescu Reagan's writings in French in a book titled La décroissance, the degrowth, point to what they call the Anthropocene's uniqueness. They say, for the scientists who announced the arrival of the Anthropocene, the larger force that has brought it is humankind understood as Homo faber, the technological man of modern Western civilization, rendered as a new geological force by means of the power to disturb the great cycles that govern the planet's trajectory. End quote. Hamilton and Greenwald argued that this new geological force is no more telluric, that is related to Earth, and it is now having an impact not only on the biosphere, but on the atmosphere and oceans, that is coupled fluid geospheres, as components of the global carbon cycle and the climate system. It is therefore by adopting such a large-scale perspective that we can actually realize where we are in this particular geohistorical moment, when Earth's metabolism, as described by Earth system scientists no sooner than 4 decades ago, has been critically deregulated by human activities, or to put it more precisely, by the Western model of economic growth. This is why they point to this Anthropocene's uniqueness, because it was discovered 4 decades ago. Earth system science brings to the fore an epistemology which is different from traditional ecology. It means that Earth, rather than a stable, silent ground for the burgeoning biosphere, is a dynamic system with its own geophysiology. This system cannot be described as a self-regulating system with the aim of optimizing the conditions for life, because these conditions can be seriously destabilized under planetary shifts now underway. As Cliff Hamilton puts it with reference to this critical moment and also in response to a certain environmentalism, Earth science system offers, I quote, a mode of understanding that requires a leap from ecological thinking, that is the science of the relationship between organisms and their local environments, to earth science thinking, which means the science of the whole Earth as a complex system beyond the sum of its parts, end quote. Nevertheless, interpreted in political and economic terms, this approach to the Earth might push forward a discussion about what to change the system can and should mean from within the macroeconomic model, which generates a critical increase in entropy of any kinds. This is the point where earth science thinking, as I would suggest, might be paired with Stigler's take on the Anthropocene, in spite of all important methodological differences I mentioned. It is worth linking these two approaches to each other, especially in order to reconsider the relation between technical human systems and the production of entropy for one important reason. Stigler's approach clearly shows that this more than telluric force, as discussed by Greenwald and Hamilton, the force having now an impact on the Earth as a complex system, is the technological one. Therefore, to challenge the Anthropocene from this perspective means to redefine the human relationship with technology, and not only related to what is referred to as new technologies, but also in relation to techniques understood as the pursuit of life by means other than life, as Stigler puts it in his first book, Techniques and Time 1. The specificity of humans is that their life in the biosphere strictly depends on technologies and co-evolve with them. These technologies are organized and they produce human worlds as entangled with the living matter, which produces the biosphere. No disentanglement is possible in the physical dimension, as well as in relation to psychosocial, political, and economic realities. So it is possible to say that the Anthropocene uniqueness, as discussed by Hamilton and Greenwald, also stems from the fact that we are experiencing the unique moment when the entropic power of technology led to the critical transformation of the biosphere into the technosphere, now extended to the whole planet. The concept of the technosphere was introduced by geologist Peter Haaf. Let me now suggest how this concept can be linked to Stigler's take on computational technology as pervading psychic and social realities. Peter Haaf describes the technosphere as large-scale technology. He says that the technosphere is the, I quote, world's large-scale energy and resource extraction systems, power generation and transmission systems, communication, transportation, financial and other networks, governments and bureaucracies, cities, factories, farms, and myriad other built systems, as well as all the parts of these systems, including computers, windows, tractors, office memos, and humans. Haaf grounds his description in physics. By doing so, he shows that the technosphere has become an uncontrollable Earth system of which humans are parts rather than independent agents. Even if humans are still essential for the system's function, they no longer have control on the technosphere. This is what he says. So what we are experiencing now, according to him, is that, I quote again, at the large scale, the unplanned, undesigned, and spontaneous crystallization of diverse and previously disparate elements of technology into the network global system called the technosphere meant there was a new player at the table whose interests would have to be considered in tandem with human interests. This is the point at which the technosphere escaped human control. Now, how we should reapproach this technosphere as described by Hav in relation to physics in the context of, let's say, social and political affairs. So if it is true that the technosphere is uncontrollable, then it would be perhaps erroneous to think that the main challenge is to take back control of it. At the same time, it would be rather nihilistic to admit that humans are now at the mercy of technosphere's growing unpredictability. So the main challenge is perhaps to unlearn to think that humans can or should master and possess the technosphere. In a nutshell, this means that would mean to leave behind the modern model of science, which, were we to believe Descartes, can make us like masters and possessors of nature. And here, what we encounter is a big epistemological issue that we inherit from the 20th century epistemology, especially related to the English-American philosophy of science. Consider the big names of 20th century philosophy of science: Popper, Lakatos, Feyerabend, Kuhn. All differences between them notwithstanding, they erected physics as the model of science, and this is, I think, a serious obstacle when we want to reconsider issues related to entropy, especially in the context of biological and social, psychological organizations. Needless to say that, according to Philip Mirowski, modern physics and economics were very inspiring to each other. So this is why epistemology here is a really important issue. Bernard Stiegler also uses the term technosphere. However, his take on the technosphere is slightly different from Hav's, firstly because it pays a special attention to how the technosphere became a planetary apparatus to control psychic and social realities, rather than how it has escaped human control at the Earth's scale. Stiegler describes the technosphere as a planetary infrastructure based on data centers and spread across the biosphere through billions of smartphones, which exploits the psychic and social lives of individuals themselves become the element of the technosphere, rather than its physical parts. According to Stiegler's explanation, the technosphere emerged from the biosphere in the process of exosomatization, a term that Stiegler coined with a nod to what biophysician and mathematician Alfred Lotka called exosomatic evolution. Exosomatic evolution refers to the production of artificial organs outside biological bodies. These organs have a decisive impact on the evolution of the living matter, which produces the biosphere through its biogeochemical activities, as described by Volodymyr Vernadsky in the 20s of the last century. In 1945, at the end of World War II, Lotka pointed out that the evolution of the human species, I quote, especially in more recent times, has followed an entirely new path. It became more rapid thanks to, through the development of artificial aids to our native receptor effector apparatus. And he called this process exosomatic evolution. A rapid growth of exosomatic organs in the 20th century involved an unprecedented dispersion of energy. Incidentally, with the first nuclear weapon detonated in 1945 by the United States Army in New Mexico, this dispersion initiated the beginning of the nuclear age, now, I quote, adopted as an effective stratigraphic boundary in Earth history, end quote, by the same Anthropocene group of Jan Zalesiewicz I already talked about. Describing exosomatic evolution at the threshold of the Anthropocene as approached by Earth system science, Lotka lucidly flagged up an ambivalent feature of exosomatic organs and special problems that emerged, I quote, with the vastly multiplied efficiency of modern industry, end quote. These organs can efficiently adapt the environment to human needs and at the same time are potent to destroy this environment if they are not organized according to people's interests. They can extend the transformative power of the mind, but they also can seriously diminish the capacity to think and be used to control populations instead of supporting psychosocial flourishing. Put shortly, exosomatic organs can both contribute to the increase and decrease in entropy of all living artificial systems. Therefore, any technology, since its conceptualization to its implementation, always involves an eminently political question about how to integrate it into society and how social organizations can make this integration possible for the good of the species, to put it as Lotka, which means how they can contribute to produce less entropy in the economic process, potently based on the process of exosomatization. And now, drawing upon Lotka's observations, Stigler flags up that the acceleration of the process of exosomatization has radically accelerated entropy generation and fundamentally changed its character. The exosomatic evolution has involved a critical geophysical transformation of the Earth system because the perceptive ability of modern humans, as well as their ability to impact the living environment, has critically augmented. However, this transformation has also induced a large-scale technological change in the organization of the realities of psychic individuals and social organizations, since the exponential development of artificial aids to the human mind-brain critically affected noetic life, that is, life related to thought. Creative intelligence, as described by Henri Bergson, still in the first half of the last century, became more and more crushed by the power of its own artificial products. The Anthropocene, as read by Stigler, is a process in which this twofold technological transformation has reached a tipping point. Exosomatic organs, instead of producing less entropy, as it is the case with endosomatic organs in the slow process of biological evolution, has become a planetary threat to the living in general and to the noetic life in particular. Therefore, if it is true that, I quote, life has the capacity to hijack Earth's evolution and perhaps steer its fate, as it is argued by astrophysicians, Frank, Walker, Greenspoon, it has to be also said that it should be also noted that life can be critically hijacked by human artifices, generating too much entropy in the process, which is first of all economic rather than purely biological. This is why the future of the technosphere still largely depends on political decisions that would make the collective struggle against entropy a fundamental task for an economy to come. With regards to the question of economy, Stigler draws upon Nicola Georgescu-Reagan's pioneering analysis of the relation between entropy and economy. Since the beginning of the 70s and before the publication of the Limits to Growth by Meadows, the Romanian-American economist pointed out that neoclassical economic thinking is fundamentally flawed because it is theoretically unable to take into account entropy generation in the economic process. As a result, the economic reason can dismiss problems related to the finitude of resources, the biophysical boundaries of the planet, and the exchanges of matter energy. Therefore, the economic process tends to strengthen the toxic, that is entropic, properties of exosomatic organs instead of minimizing their negative impact and fostering their potentially beneficial effects. Stigler extrapolates Georgescu-Reagan's observations on psychosocial realities that the Romanian economists never referred to. In fact, with the subsequent mutations of capitalism and its technologies, like cultural capitalism and computational capitalism, consumerist capitalism, exosomatic organs started to have a heavy impact on how these realities are shaped by media, as well as by the exponentially increasing computing power supplying digital platforms. The subordination of technology to the market not only has reduced exosomatic organs to mere functionalism, but also had a decisive influence on what their functionalities look like. A critical increase in entropy, specifically related to psychosocial realities, can be defined as a critically weakened ability to think with technologies and consequently to produce new forms of knowledge. This is because technologies are put at the service of the same self-destructive macroeconomic model, which is responsible for the increase of physical and biological entropies. For Stigler, humans and societies can produce less entropy, which means they can face the Anthropocene by producing new forms of knowledge. Anne is going to elaborate on what Stigler means by knowledge and why he considers the production of knowledge as the way to go beyond the Anthropocene as an Anthropocene. Anyway, this is taken to be a kind of an axiom in Stigler's philosophical project. We can fight against the Anthropocene by producing all forms of knowledge. Clearly, from the climate's perspective, which is absolutely essential, facing the Anthropocene amounts to get out of carboniferous capitalism. However, operating such a shift, especially from within industrial democracies where the human footprint is particularly large, involves a substantial social change that needs to be discussed with an account of multiple scales this change refers to. Stigler's attempt to revalue the production of knowledge as a human way to contain entropy and to redefine economy as a planetary process which fosters the production of knowledge paves the way for such a change. To conclude, Stigler's take on entropy as the central issue of the Anthropocene requires further developments in order to make the link between all kinds of entropy more solid from theoretical and operational viewpoints. However, his merit is to pave the way to an interscientific understanding of entropy and to a reconsideration of its meaning, not only from a thermodynamic viewpoint grounded in physics, but also in relation to perspectives emerging from ecology, theoretical biology, anthropology, technology, sociology, economics, and political theory. In the book States of Shock, which is about university in the 21st century, Stigler also suggested what is to be done by what he defined as the interscience. Let me quote to finish my talk. An interscience for the 21st century must take shape within universities worldwide. The interscience, which is inseparable from technological becoming, must undertake and critique the genealogy of the acceleration of the transfer time of technologies in order to effect bifurcation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Michel. Maybe I can start with my presentation and we have a general discussion after. Maybe it's better like that because I think
so, yeah, because our presentations are related, right? So,
okay, yeah, completely. So I have to share my my presentation. Okay. Yes, and indeed, I'm going to. Can you see the presentation? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to take up on this question of, or on the one of the questions you raised at the end, that is the question of knowledge and the role of knowledge in economy, because it is a very important point, I think, for in Stigler's philosophy. And I'm going to speak about Stigler philosophy, but mostly on this question of contributory economy, which was a question in which we worked a lot in the collective book that we published, which was called Bifurcate. And in fact, I think that the main idea of this idea of contributory economy, and this is why this contributory economy is not something like collaborative economy or anything like that. The main idea of contributory economy is the idea that knowledge has a specific function in human society and in let's say for the life of every type of beings, and that it has to have a very important value in economy. So I will try to explain that a bit more, and I will speak mostly about two texts from Bernard Stiegler, which you can see on the presentation, which were written in 2015 and 2019. So if you want more information about that, you can read these texts. So in one of these texts, which is called Ergon in the Anthropocene and the New Question of Wealth, Bernard Stiegler is saying that in the Anthropocene era, we need to rethink both the wealth and the meaning of work. So this means that if we want to understand what contributory economy means, we have to understand what is this new conception of work and what is this new conception of wealth. And these two new conceptions of work and of wealth are linked with a new conception of knowledge. So I will try to explain that. First, the new conception of work, then the new conception of knowledge, and then the new conception of wealth. And then at the end, I will try to show how this leads to the proposition of the contributory economy in the context of digital automation. So first, on the question of work. So in the article I just mentioned, Stiegler is saying that we need to rethink work in the 21st century on new theoretical and practical basis in order to transform the industrial economy. So in a recent interview, Gaël Giraud was saying a very similar thing. because when he was asked what we have to, when he was asked, sorry, what we have to do if we want to transform economy, he said, among other things, that if we want to really transform economy, we have to reinvent labor. And that is to say, to think a decent labor in the sense of the international Labor Organization, but also labor as the way of socialization, labor as buen vivir, labor in the understanding of Shona language in Zimbabwe, which relates it to the people, to nature, to the ancestors, etc. And also labor as experience in the sense of Swaraj in India, that is the way we can teach ourselves, learn self-control and self-limitation. And indeed, this kind of new labor, of new conception of labor, was exactly what Stigler was trying to think, except that Stigler was considering that it was such a new conception that we should not talk about labor anymore, but that we should talk about work. And this was the reason why he distinguished, he insisted on the distinction between labor on one side and work on the other side, leaning on the conception of, leaning on the notions, sorry, of ponos and ergon in Greek. Sorry, I just checked something. Okay. So, so in the same text, Stigler is writing that according to Jean-Pierre Vernant, who is an historian and anthropologist who worked on ancient Greece. So according to Jean-Pierre Vernant, ancient Greeks distinguished in an essential way between ponos, that is to say labor, labor in French, and ergon, that is to say work, ouvrage in French. And this distinction between labor and work is very classic in a way, and Stigler just insists on it. Labor means the pure force or the pure energy which can be exchanged for a wage, for a salary, and work means the practice of knowledge through which some works are produced. So a work on art, for example. So for Stigler, work is first of all an activity in which through which a work is produced, a work in the sense of ergon in Greek. So what we have to precise here is that a work for Stigler, a work of art, is not necessarily artistic. We have to understand work in a very broad sense. A work does not only designate an artistic work, but also a scientific work, a technical work, a social work, political work, practical work, any kind of work. So I quote him. Picasso paints, for example, and I make my garden. That brings me something. I don't make my garden just to have carrots. I cultivate a knowledge of living plants, which I can share with gardeners as well as with botanists. If I read books, if I participate in the Wikipedia site, or if I develop free software, it is not primarily to obtain a salary. It is to enrich myself in a much richer sense, perhaps to earn or save a little money, but above all, to build myself up and to fulfill myself, to be accomplished in life. So what we can see in this quotation is that there are two very important dimensions of work for him. So the social dimension, first, you practice a knowledge which can be shared with others. So you constitute a kind of interpersonal relationship. And then what we could call the existential dimension of work. Sorry, you fulfill yourself, you accomplish yourself through the practice of a knowledge. So you have an individual feeling of accomplishment, fulfillment. So you realize your individual capacities. And these two dimensions, the social dimension and the existential dimension of work, were the two characteristic of what André Gortz, the philosopher André Gortz, defined as the real wealth. The most important wealth, he wrote, is always cultural wealth, that of human capacities and interpersonal relationships, which has no venal value. So Gortz was a philosopher who worked a lot on the question of work. He worked a lot on the question of ecology too. And one of his main points on this question of work was to distinguish two meanings of work. No, first, sorry, the first thing he pointed out was the fact that we have to have an anthropological or philosophical conception of work, which means the externalization by which a subject realizes himself by inscribing himself in the objective materiality of what he creates or produces. So, for example, the artistic activities, physical activities, philosophical activities, scientific activities, we could say also political activities, whose aim is the creation of meaning, the creation of oneself, the creation of knowledge. All these activities for him are activities of work in the anthropological or philosophical sense, and he distinguished work from employment. Because in the everyday language, we tend to confuse two meanings of work, and Gortz wanted to distinguish these two meanings. So the first meaning is the work that one has, so is work employment, and the second meaning is the work that one does, it is free work. And the work that one has is simply what we call employment, that is to say an activity in which the subject is subordinated to an employer who determines the purpose and the goal of his activity and who pay him. And the work that one does, the free work, is an activity which is, Gortz also speaks about a self-activity. It means an activity that the subject is accomplishing for itself, an activity which has its own hand in itself, its own value, whose finality is not determined by another person, an activity which is chosen for its own content and not for an external retribution, and which is not fulfilled under any pressure or to obtain something else. So an activity that you are doing because of this activity itself. So it is very important to distinguish these two meanings between what you call work employment and free work, because if you look, for example, in the labor law, the French labor law, you will see that work is defined as the working time is defined as the time during which the employee is at the disposal of his employer and must comply with his instructions without being able to freely go about his own business. So this definition of work in labor law is, in fact, it is what Gortz defined as employment. So it's not work anymore, it is employment. And it is precisely because of this confusion that Alain Supiot, who is a French jurist who worked a lot on the question of work too, can write that we have to distinguish, we have to change this meaning of work in the labor law. So Alain Supiot writes that if we don't want anti-human masses to be relegated below employment, labor law must open up beyond employment. The fiction which makes work a simple means to the service of financial objectives is no longer ecologically sustainable on a global scale. It must give way to a status of work that combines freedom, security, and responsibility. So here, Alain Supiot is speaking obviously about free work in the sense of Gortz and not about employment, which is defined in the labor law. And this is also the reason why Stigler is making this distinction. So this distinction between employment on one side and work on the other side. So employment, according to Stigler, is what is remunerated by a wage, and work, on the contrary, I mean, not on the contrary, but work is something different. It's an activity through which one cultivates a knowledge, whatever it may be, by accomplishing something. To work is always to practice a kind of knowledge, and reciprocally, to practice a knowledge is always to work. So for Stigler, there is a kind of equivalence between work and practicing a knowledge. So this is why we have to precise a bit what he understands as a knowledge. So first, we have to remember that for Stigler, a knowledge is not only a theoretical knowledge, knowledge can be every kind of knowledge, so practical knowledge, technical knowledge, artistic knowledge, social knowledge, existential knowledge, also conceptual and theoretical knowledge, of course, but not only. So this is what he writes in this quotation. In all its forms, such as knowing how to live, knowing how to do, knowing how to conceptualize, knowledge it is what allows human beings to take care of themselves and with them of their environment and of the future of life on Earth. So knowledge for Stigler is, first of all, an activity of care. And to understand that, we have to remember his theory of techniques, because according to Stigler, it is because we are technical beings, we live in technical milieu, that we need all this knowledge, because human beings are living in technical environments, and these technical environments are evolving very quickly. And in order to adapt them to live collectively in these technical environments, human beings have to develop knowledge. So and to renew this knowledge, to transform this knowledge. And all these different kind of knowledge are the way in which human beings are going to take care of themselves collectively, and also of their technical environments. So a very an example that we can give to understand that very quickly is the example of the car, because it is very easy to understand that if you develop lots of cars in a society, but if you don't develop the knowledge in order to drive these cars, then if there are no knowledge which are transmitted and practiced, the cars will not be an efficient means of transportation, but they will become a kind of very dangerous technology. Of course, there will be lots of accidents, and also if you don't develop new knowledge to build new cars in the current context of the ecological crisis, for example, or if you don't build new knowledge to share some cars, for example, then you will just destroy the environments with your cars. And this is something that was criticized by André Gortz in the 1970s already. So cars in themselves are not something which can be necessarily beneficial for human beings, but they have, of course, to be adopted through every kind of knowledge. So practical knowledge to drive, technical knowledge to build ecological cars, social knowledge to share cars, and every kind of other knowledge. So also what we can see with this example is also that according to the different localities, the way this knowledge are changing. They are different in the different localities. So you don't drive in the same way in India or in New York. You don't drive in the same way in New York and in Iran. You don't drive in the same way in China, for example, with the rickshaws technology or with the smartphone technologies. In fact, the knowledge are changing according to the spaces and according to the epochs. So they are what are making the human societies different from one another, and what are making human societies different through time. So for this is the reason why Stigler maintains that they are negantropic, because so he writes this quotation that I'm going to read. Knowledge is the capacity acquired by an individual or a group to produce bifurcations that enrich reality by introducing into it not only negantropy with an E, but also what I call negantropy with an A and an H. That is the way in which human beings, by producing artificial organs, enrich the world by a way that is not biological, but technological. And we could say social too. So what he means by this sentence is the fact that through the practice and through the transformation of knowledge, a new kind of diversity and a new kind of novelty is produced, which is not only the novelty which is produced through the evolution of life, but the novelty which is produced through the evolution of societies, and the novelty which is produced in the different localities of the world. So negantropy with an A and an H, maybe we should not put U here, I don't know. So, but negantropy with an A and an H is the word which is used by Stigler to designate this diversity and this novelty, which is no longer biological, but which is also psychic and social, and thanks to which human groups organize themselves, maintain themselves through time, transform themselves, also renew themselves, and diversify. So it is a word which is used to define this kind of social diversification and evolution. And this is what is important to remember here is that speaking of negantropic knowledge is also a way for Stigler to say that this knowledge have a vital function in human societies. That a human group cannot survive without this production and this transformation of knowledge. And this is why you will say that they have a value, and they are the most important wealth for us, for human society. And so this is the last point I wanted to speak about before explaining contributory economy, maybe. So the last point was to say that according to Stigler and according to what I said just before, if we want the economy to be at the service of human life or human societies, and more generally at the service of life in general, because human life, of course, is nothing without other forms of life. So an economy should value the different kind of knowledge, which are also different kind of care, and through which human beings take care of themselves and of their environment. But today, the problem is that these activities of knowledge are not valued by the economic indicators. They are not valorized at all. On the contrary, the value of such activities are neglected in a way. They are not taken into account by current economic indicators such as GDP, for example, which only measures the exchange value and not the value of this knowledge. So this is the reason why Stigler was saying that the development of the negantropic economy should be based on new indicators of wealth and on a new criteria for calculating value. So according to him, it is necessary to reconsider economy on the basis of a new conception of value or of wealth, which take into account the value of work and knowledge, and which is not reducible to use value or to exchange value. So this new conception of value, which is not reducible to use value or to exchange value, he calls it practical value. He also calls it negantropic value or contributory value, but in this text, it is called practical value. So he calls practical value the value that is neither reduced to exchange value nor to use value. Practical value is what is worth by itself and does not get used, constituting what is called knowledge, which itself does not lose its value with time, which is unusable in this sense, but which is by nature and structurally shareable and shared by human beings as well as across generations. So what Stigler wants to say here is that knowledge has a specific kind of value, which is not reducible to use value or to exchange value. So it is not reducible to use value because you don't use knowledge when you practice it. It's not like when you wear your shoes, for example, you walk with your shoes and your shoes get used. But no, if you play piano, for example, you will not use your knowledge. On the contrary, you will keep on enrich it the more you practice it, the more you will enrich it. And in the same way, knowledge is not reducible to exchange value, because when you share your knowledge, you don't lose some knowledge. On the contrary, when you share your knowledge, you get more knowledge. So it's not when you have a piece of bread and you share it with your neighbor, you have less bread than at the beginning. But when you share your knowledge, you have more knowledge. So it's a kind of a magical process, which means that knowledge is not something which can become merchandised. So if we want to take into account the value of knowledge and of work, according to Stigler, we had to have a new conception of wealth and of value, which he calls practical value, or contributory value, or a negantropic value. So this means that we have to take into account the production of knowledge and its value, whereas in our society, most of the time we are just reducing knowledge to a mere merchandise, or to a mere product which can be sold. And this is what leads to what we call cognitive capitalism, for example. So contributory economy, in this sense, is an economy of negantropy, which is based on a revaluation of knowledge in all its form: living, doing, and thinking. So if I have just maybe one, no, maybe I should stop there. I don't know, because we have to keep some time for the discussion. So I don't know, maybe I can. What do you think, Michał?
We have 50 minutes left. So how much time would you need to finish your presentation?
Maybe I can stop there, no, because we have to keep some time for the discussion.
Yeah,
let's
discuss. Yeah, it was very rich. So perhaps.
Okay. So I can complete if it's necessary after.
Yeah. Especially that there is already one big question about Shannon's theory, information and entropy in its theory. So
okay, so yeah. Oh yes, there are lots of questions. Yes, okay, maybe I will take the time to read them, but if someone wants to speak or say something, you...
Yeah, so the first question was asked by Benji HM. I'm pretty sure that Giuseppe might want to comment on it. The question is, I know we discussed this before, but I need a question about entropy clarified again. In information theory, the more information a system has, the more entropy it has, that is, capacity to surprise us according to Shannon. If a system is more carefully ordered, it has less capacity to surprise us and therefore low entropy. As reticular systems automatically integrate more of our lives, they are sorting us into various behavioral categories, organizing our lives and reducing our capacities for singular experiences. However, if we say that these systems are generating more entropy, this conflicts with Shannon's interpretation of entropy, which is a state of chaos. Would Shannon's idea of high entropy be a tangle of singular experiences that cannot be captured and predicted by our technical systems, or do we need to distinguish our interpretation of entropy from that of information theory? Well, my understanding of Shannon is that of a philosopher. It's very difficult for me, but as I understand this, is that this theory deals very little, if anything, with what we should call today the dispersion of information. In fact, in Shannon's theory, there is no question about the meaning, and information is a signal. This is first of all, this is a theory of communication. So Shannon tries to determine how a signal can be distinguished from noise produced in the communications canal and then be sent or recognized as what he calls information. So, but the problem that we are experiencing now, I think, wherever we are and whoever we are, is that what we discover is that too much information is just noise. It does not produce, it does not serve knowledge, and it can even destroy cognition, right? In this context, for example, World Health Organization speaks of infodemics, right? Which shows to what an extent information, when it is separated from interpretation, when it is automatized and algorithmized, can have some kind of virologist effect, right? So for me, there is a contradiction in Shannon's theory, but perhaps Giuseppe.
I think Gael also answered to Benji in the discussion, so maybe you can just explain.
Yeah, just one sentence. You know, when information is automatized, it can produce nothing but the most probable. And the most probable is entropy, right? Even according to a physicist viewpoint, as discussed by Norbert Wiener, for example, who says that entropy increases when there is a move from the least to the most probable, because then there is only chaos and sameness, right? So here. Perhaps it is in fact necessary to discover a kind of a contradiction in Shannon's theory and reconsider what we call information beyond this reductive, by definition, perspective of Shannon.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. No, there is no contradiction in Shannon. There is a contradiction in the friction with other forms and other notions of entropy, order, disorder, complexity, information. And I think it's a real mess because per se, in the theory of communication and transmission, the highly disordered sequences, the maximally disordered sequence, which can be defined, contains no information. And it is fair, more or less fair, to call it with the highest entropy. Okay, it is fair. It is not totally precise. Why not? Because entropy as a physical dimension in Boltzmann's treatment, when it was treated in statistical physics as an understanding in terms of particles of the thermodynamic notion of entropy, in that case, there is a coefficient, K, which gives a dimension to entropy. Brillouin, who made the bridge, is fully aware. I will discuss about that. Brillouin makes a bridge between entropy and information, being perfectly aware that there is a fundamental difference between entropy and negentropy as given in information theory, simply because there is a K, which changes the dimension, Boltzmann K. However, he discovers, he understands that when you make a minor measurement, the smallest possible measurement, which requires the least quantity of energy, you require even detecting 0, detecting 1, or changing 1 to 0, you require some energy, and thus you transform some energy, and thus you do produce entropy. The least quantity of entropy is the one he analyzes that is needed to change the 0 in 1, a 1 in a 0. That's why he makes the connection, which is fantastic. He understands that measurement in classical physics is not for free. Usually is considered for free. In quantum mechanics, it was never considered for free. But in classical physics, yes, it was considered for free. And Shannon, Brillouin observes, no, the least measurement requires a value that he quantifies, k log k, of course, with the Boltzmann k, log 2, a production of entropy. So he makes the connection. If you write or erase 0 or 1, you do produce a least quantity of entropy. So he makes a connection between entropy and information, but he's perfectly aware that there is a dimensional difference, okay? So the first point, so there is this abuse that goes on identifying the entropy with information in view of the beautiful link made by Brillouin. However, okay, let's accept it on the ground of that link. One can make the analogy, information as negentropy. Why negentropy? Because it has the opposite sign. In the sense that the totally disordered sequence for Shannon contains the least amount of information. So the largest is the entropy, the smallest is the amount of information, okay? So that's the first point, a legitimate link, but we have to be careful. There is a major abuse, which you would be fired as a student immediately in physics by getting the wrong dimension. There is a K in the middle. Again, once this is made clear, one can keep saying, okay, negentropy is a form of information. As they are contravariant, in the sense, if information increases, entropy decreases. If entropy increases, information decreases. Now it happens that there is another theory of information, which is Turing-Kolmogorov elaboration of information. Then you have to produce a sequence, not just to transmit or communicate a sequence, but to produce a sequence by program. In this theory, a totally disordered sequence is incompressible, and it contains the largest amount of information for good reasons, Information in Turing-Kolmogorov elaboration of information, in theory of computability, I'm talking, theory of programming, not a minor area. In this theory, information is covariant with entropy. A totally disordered sequence is the most expensive, is the most complex, requires the largest amount of information because you want to produce bit by bit. There is no way to shorten your program to produce it. You are forced to know each position in this totally disordered sequence. There are no regularities that you can compress. So in this theory of elaboration of information, entropy of information are covariant. Okay, that's not important for what you have been discussing. However, from a scientific point of view, okay, one has to be a little careful. These notions are specified in those very important theories of information. The only two theories we have, robust theory of digital information. One is communication or transmission. The other one is elaboration of information. And their relation between information complexity and entropy are opposite, are dual.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the first thing to clarify. After having said that the identification of information and negentropy is already in abuse and really it doesn't work with elaboration of information, okay, because they are incompressible sequences, the totally disordered one for Kolmogorov contain the largest amount of information. Now that we transfer these notions about human activity, I think it's stimulating, it's interesting, but okay, the reference to the sciences must be done with some precaution, I would say. That's why even when moving to biology, Francis Bailly and I, in 2009, we prefer to use a different word, anti-entropy, as the construction of organization is organization in a logical sense. And we did it, I will try to hint to this in my lecture, in this seminar series, but I understand I will lecture on a Monday, at 4 on a Monday, because on Tuesday on 11, I will, I'm lecturing elsewhere in Paris in presence. So my lecture will be October 10. I will try to get to these issues. So we propose the notion of anti-entropy, which has another dimension. You see, entropy and negentropy are in the same dimension. So if they have the same, you have the same amount of entropy and negentropy, in principle, you get to zero, because they're opposed to each other. While anti-entropy has another dimension, it refers to organization. We quantified by this complexity of an organism in a rather abstract way to answer a question raised by Gould in evolution concerning the complexification, evaluating the complexification of organisms during evolution, if ever this happens. So this was a way to discuss the geometric complexity, essentially, by the notion of anti-entropy, which may be fair. I think that Bernard liked that very much when we discussed it first. According to Michał, who made the bridge and made major contribution to our notion of anti-entropy by adding the role of symmetries, Michał Monteville, what really Bernard meant was our notion of anti-entropy. Of course, he didn't have the scientific background, he invented this word, but that's what he really meant. I think Michał is right. That's why we understood each other very well. I will elaborate on that. But again, we don't need to use words for science, and we may also give to them different meaning. Why not? But then it's very dangerous to time refer to the scientific use, and which use is that elaboration of information or transmission of information. Again, for good reasons, they're orthogonal in the relation between complexity, information, of entropy. Okay, so
yes,
let's use these words, but any scientific reference must be a little more precise, otherwise it's a total mess, I think.
Yes, I totally agree with what you said, Giuseppe. And just to clarify a bit the debate, yes, there is this big confusion. I mean, it's not a confusion, but in the two different theories of information, the link between information and entropy are opposite. So we should be careful of which theory of information and which notion of entropy we are using. So this is the first problem. And the second problem is also the distinction between information and knowledge, which are not the same thing at all. And maybe Gael, you can add something on that, because I think Gael wrote something to Benji. And so can you just say a word about your answer, Gael, because I think it was linked with this question of knowledge. And
sure, indeed. What I wanted to say actually is much simpler than what Giuseppe just said. At a much simpler level, I think, just to make sure that everybody understands that the way we can just very simply describe Shannon's understanding of information is that if you have a coin and you toss a coin, and if your coin is unbiased, you have 50-50, you have, the result, you have two results, and each has the same probability to occur. So you know nothing. The entropy is very high. If you have a biased coin, you need a bit more about the output of the coin. And then the entropy, according to Shannon, is lower, okay? So, and that's why some people say that if the entropy is higher, you have more surprise because you are surprised by the outcome of your toss, of your coin, of tossing your coin. But of course, this surprise has nothing to do with the surprise in the sense of Stigler. I guess what Stigler wanted to say, even though I'm not a specialist of Stigler, is that you have a surprise if you can bifurcate from the path that you had in the past and enter into a new uncharted territory, do something new, etc., etc. For that purpose, I guess, still following Stigler, you need a lot of knowledge, not information, but a lot of knowledge. And let's say prioritization is a way to prevent us from sharing and keeping this knowledge and sharing it, as you said, Anne. And therefore, it's a way to prevent us from knowing things about, let's say, the outcome of tossing a coin. So actually, to create a surprise, in the sense of Stigler, requires you to know things which require you to reduce your entropy in the sense of Shannon. Okay? And
yes.
Probably, what Giuseppe said about the Turing-Kolmogorov alternative to Shannon would go much more easily in the direction of what Stigler wanted to say. I don't know whether what I'm saying is helpful. I hope so.
Yeah, a lot. Because if I can add just something which I think it's very important and linked with your question, Benji, even if I will not use the notion of entropy, is what you just said, Gael, this notion of surprise in Stigler's work is linked, and the notion of bifurcation too is linked with the possibility to accumulate collective memory. Okay, and this is precisely why you can have a parallel with a life. You know, because life is memory, even life, not human life, but the evolution of life is the capacity to keep a past present in a way. And it is because you can keep this past present that you can create a future, which is not the same than the past. You know, if you don't keep the past, the future will just be a repetition of the past. It will not be new. If you want to have novelty, you have to have memory. So, and this kind of novelty, which is linked with the accumulation of memory and the transformation of memory and the interpretation of memory, this kind of novelty, it's not at all the same kind of surprise that you have with the probabilities that you were just mentioning before. It has nothing to do with that. You know, it's something new. It's not as to take a notion which is developed by Giuseppe in another context. It means that you have a new space of possible which is open. You know, this notion of a space of possible. You are not in a space of possible and then you have some probabilities. No, it's not that. It's that you open a new space of possible. Okay, and this is what happened also when you have the transformation of a knowledge. You know, so it's not a question of probable. So yeah. Now on the Shannon theory, I cannot answer, of course, but it's yeah.
Yes, that's right. All these things are related to probability. Probability is a measure. In order to make a measurement, you must have a priori the space of possibilities. And then in historical sciences, as the possibilities are constructed by the very historical dynamics, you do not have a probability of the unpredictable. The unpredictable, in principle, is not given in probabilities. That's against physics. If unpredictability is randomness with respect to the intended theory, in any intended physical theory, there is a space of phase which is given a priori, so you can give a measurement. So the unpredictability as a randomness is always related to probabilities. In fact, if you ask a physicist what is randomness, they say it is something which I can measure with probability, a probability measurement. Randomness is what may be measured in terms of probabilities. Very often in physics is like that, because I mean, you know, time from Aristotle to Einstein is what is measured by clocks. So probabilities is what, randomness is what measured by probabilities, Kolmogorov axiomatization of randomness. And then you put the things together and you say the irreversibility of thermodynamic time is the low probabilities, very low probabilities that the thermodynamic process goes backwards. It's a matter of probability. So also irreversibility of time in physics, it's a matter of probabilities, and both time and probabilities are measurements, which makes nonsense in an historical science like biology, or I think economy, where in an historical science you have the changement of the very space of possibilities as the development of time. That's why we like to have 3 dimensions of time in historical science like biology related to this fact. One is the thermodynamic time, where you can have all these notions of entropy and probabilities and so on. Another is the time for rhythms that we accommodated in a different dimensions and for good reasons in biology. And then a 3rd dimension, an historical time, which doesn't exist in physical theories. I mean, you know, a hurricane, a flame, they are irreversible, but they are identical since 4 billion years. They have no history. They are identical, the same time, no problem. Life has been changing quite a lot in the last 4 billion years.
Yes, and exosomatic life too. But maybe, thank you very much, Giuseppe. Maybe if someone else has another question or want to discuss something, feel free to speak.
Yeah, we have a lot of time for discussion. This is why we organize this seminar. So if you have questions, do not hesitate. Morten.
Thank you, and thanks a lot for your very nice presentations. I'm looking forward to showing this to my my new research intern who couldn't make it because she's fighting as a student for neurodiversity, the Department of Psychology in Copenhagen at the moment. But so she can watch this recording. This is nice, I think. I was wondering about this this conceptualization of labor that you presented, Anne. How, if you could maybe unfold perhaps a little bit, how this discussion of work versus employment sort of relates to, at least there are two traditions that to me come to mind as important. In a way, the Marxian tradition that sort of takes up very similar distinctions, but also the Aristotelian, or maybe neo-Aristotelian tradition. People like MacIntyre, Toulmin, or others who draw on the concept of Aristotle, poiesis, phronesis, praxis, and so on, to make distinctions about work and labor. I don't know if it's possible just to jump in with comparisons, but to me it seems that those traditions are quite strong if you look at theories of practice and the relation between practice and knowledge, as I know them. So I would be curious if you could make connections and around these.
Yes, I no, I think I can't, but you will do it, Morten, when you will come to speak, because because I think it's very interesting. But the thing is that I don't know these traditions enough. But if I just try to answer very quickly to what you said, I don't know this. I don't know very well at all this Aristotelian tradition with MacIntyre and all these people. So I cannot speak. But about that, but I just wanted to say something about this notion of praxis, because when I think, it's my point of view, but maybe it's false. It's just that when I think that when Stigler is speaking about this practical value, I think it is linked with the question of praxis in the Aristotelian sense, because praxis is this kind of activity which has its own end in itself. That you are doing for its own sake and not for having a salary or I don't know what. So I guess this question of an activity, which is what Gortz was calling a self-activity, auto-activity in French, an activity in which you can have your own ends, your own finalities. They are not determined by someone else. It is also a way to define freedom in a way. And I think this is a very important background, and this is why I think Bernard Stiegler is using this word practical value to say this value which has a value in itself and which is something you cannot measure according to his use or according to his price or things like that. So sorry, it's not very clear, but this was the first point. And the second point, yes, I think with Marx you can find many common grounds, but the thing is that it would be too long to answer to your question on just now, because this there is all this Stigler is rereading Marx in a way, but transforming his thought at the same time with this notion of proletarianization, which extends this notion of the proletariat in Marx, and also this what he yes, I think that what is speaking with this this notion of capacitation and deproletarianization, all these activities when you are supposed to practice a knowledge. In a way, it's an answer to what Marx was saying with the notion of alienation, saying that the alienation is when your knowledge is externalized in your tool, in a machine, that you lose your knowledge and you become the element of the technosphere, as Michał was saying before. So in a way, I think the contributory economy is a way to give an answer to this process of alienation in the 21st century. I would say something like that, but it's, yeah. But you will have to develop on these questions, Morten, because I think you have the background to do that.
Maybe I could just retrace that there has been a development of the concept of praxis since Aristotle, where in Aristotle it's actually exactly the free, and there's this dichotomy between the freedom of praxis and the labor of of the slaves and the women and the cattle and all of those who are just instruments for others and so on. But then later the term praxis is generalized or universalized, and it becomes precisely the material productive activity which and taken up as such in the Marxist tradition, I think. But I think the interesting potential here is actually to overcome the sort of separation between praxis, an end in itself, and on the other hand, the purely instrumental labor. I think that's the potential in Stigler's way of thinking. And it has to do, of course, with the overcoming of the class differences that constituted the Aristotelian universe as well. So I guess that would be my take on it, but yeah, maybe I can contribute something about that at a later point.
If I may add something to what you've been talking about, I think that an important reference here is Henri Gauss, because he showed very precisely that this reduction of work to labor is the invention of our modernity. And then he says, so okay, we need to revisit the philosophical assumptions behind what we call modernity, which, as we know, tends to rationalization and which became irrational, right? Especially with this reduction of work to labor, right? So here I agree. Stigler's point is quite promising, because he says that okay, we need to revisit praxis in order to make it something creative, or this is not the distinction between otium and negotium, but this is something like, producing otium within negotium, right?
Yeah, there would be a lot to say about all this, but maybe I just see that there is another question in the discussion, so maybe Somak, do you want to ask your question? Yeah.
Yes. My question is really easy. It's just how to organize this new kind of relationship, because today we are talking about cooperation between different kinds of people, but we can see that every day that what is really major are more all those antagonisms between imperialisms. I really think about Russians and Americans, for example, and we are trying here to speak between these two notions of employment and labor, how we can live a meaningful life. But as we can say, it's not that easy, and I think that this contributory research can be a way, but how to make it meaningful, because this idea of technosphere is not something really easy to get. And I know that each time I talk about it with people, it's not that easy to understand. So that's my question.
Yes, I don't know if I should answer. Michel, do you have an answer, or someone has an answer? But I can try to answer if you want my point of view. But
go on. Oh.
No, the thing is that I don't know. I'm not sure that there is really a solution of for the problem you are raising. The thing is that, yes, the notion of technosphere is not very easy to understand, but it is the case for every theoretical notion in a way. So you have to take time to understand this kind of notion, to read a lot, to work a lot, and all these things. So maybe when you want to translate that into political propositions, it's a bit difficult because it's not something automatic that you can do like that. So when you were speaking about contributory research, I think this is what we were trying to do with this international project, which was aiming at connecting different researchers and also connecting different practical initiatives. And so I guess the only way is to create some, how to say that in English, some spaces for the theoretical questions to be translated into more practical projects, you know. So you have to create this kinds of transitional space where you can have the encounter between theoretical questions and practical projects, but it's very complicated to make this become concrete. I agree with you on that. So that's
Yes,
not an answer. That was just to say.
maybe I have to precise a little bit more my question, but actually Andrew really answered it in the way I wanted to go. It's about political issues, and today technosphere is not thought as somewhere you have to think about it in an ethical yes, there's no morality in science. It's like there's no political issue with it, but that's not real. There are political issues. You cannot use social network the way you can go outside in the street, and you see that people, when they talk to each other in the real life, they don't write to each other in the same way on social network. You don't say even hello or goodbye or thank you. This technosphere has an impact on the way we interact between each others, and we cannot let it without rule. That's really my point.
Yes,
Yeah, totally.
we totally agree with that. And you know, there's many levels for these rules, and so you know, maybe that I mean, yes, there's many questions in your questions, because this is a real question: how to make laws for the technosphere. You know, this is really a question of the 21st century, and there is nothing obvious about that, because if you look, for example, that at the DSA and DMA, no, how do you say that in English? Digital Services Act and Digital Market Act, which are two laws which are discussed at the level of European Union for the moment, about the regulation of the economy of digital platforms, for example. This is something completely new. I mean, and this is just an economic law. This is not a law about to regulate the behaviors of people on social networks, for example. But these are raising other questions. So you have multiple levels, and I think it is something that we are just facing this new kind of question, because before, you know, you had the concept of law was linked with the concept of a territory, you know. Mm-hmm. And what is completely new now with this technosphere is that the concept of law is not directly, not in the same way linked with the question of the territory. And because precisely disruption is that a disruptive technology, for example, all the platform that we know, all the Uber and all these things, where I mean they were their technological efficiency disrupted the legal rules or the political rules, and there is a real problem here. So yes, I guess it's a huge question, but yeah.
There are also several levels of the technosphere. The technosphere we are using now with this program, and the technosphere as the Earth system. And I think that it is necessary, we need to find all these relations, all these links in order to answer your question, how to introduce the contributory economy. Because I don't really think that we are able to, let's say, ecologize digital platforms without taking into account higher technospheric systems which create our biosphere and the Earth. Right? And this, I do agree with you. This concept of technosphere is difficult to understand because it is a fresh concept, right? It comes from earth science, which has, I don't know, 4 decades or 5, right? So it is a really new territory epistemologically, right? So this is why it is really hard to understand all these relations. But I think that ecological thinking must take into account all these entangled layers.
Yeah, I think Joel has a question.
Yes, so thank you both for your talks. They were both very rich and clear. My question is about the, I guess, the nomenclature of the term Anthropocene, and namely, like in my own research, I've come across several philosophical critiques of this term. I'm thinking of Jason Moore and his writings on the Capitalocene, as well as Donna Haraway and Hassana Sharp have written on this issue. And it seems that there are kind of 2 main critiques that I've seen of this term. I'm just wondering what your thoughts on them are. And so I guess the first critique is the idea of putting the onus on the anthropos, on all human beings, for the ecological crisis in which we find ourselves today, when it's actually just a very select few capitalist industrialists who are actually creating the ecological crisis, whereas the Australian Aborigines, for example, have absolutely no role in this. They are not impacting the environment on nearly the same scale as big oil or the fishing industry or industrial livestock industry or something along those lines. And then there's also the deeper question of the meaning of a species and how do we even define what it means to be a human being. So there's that one issue on the one hand, and then there's the second issue that I think Jason Moore really focuses on, which is this problem of dating the beginning of the Anthropocene with the Industrial Revolution. As I understand, Jason Moore wants to date it with the Orbis hypothesis, the idea that it actually starts with colonialism, and that if we focus too much on the Industrial Revolution, okay, we put the blame on technology rather than on capital and racist ideologies. So I would just like to hear your thoughts on these issues. These are both problems that I think a lot about. And I know Stiegler, I think he's aware of these critiques as well in his own works. He does use the term Capitalocene sometimes, but it's usually just a remark in passing where he'll say the Anthropocene and then in parentheses, which is also the Capitalocene, and then he just keeps going on, but he never, as far as I can tell, he's never really expanded on that and given a more expansive account of how these 2 terms are interchangeable for him.
Yeah, thank you for this question. My general answer would be that scholars working in the humanities should finally learn how to talk to each other instead of disputing each other. Because, you know, this is not a competition, Capitalocene, Anthropocene, Cthulhucene, to put it as Haraway, because, you know, each of these perspectives brings something important, right? By highlighting this or that aspect. You know, there is no, for me, there is no problem whether we call it the Anthropocene or the Capitalocene, because, for example, in Stigler's philosophy, there is a constant critique of capitalism. Yeah, we can, and we should talk about the very beginning, when it started, with the exponential growth of agriculture in the 16th century, combined with the colonialist adventure, or with the Industrial Revolution. But at the end, you know, the goal is the same, right? And what I'm not able to find in Jason Moore's writing, that I really adore, is the answer. Okay, so what the Leninian question: what is to be done? What is to be done? And in Stigler, there is this answer: let's organize contributory economy. I don't know if it will work, because, you know, the question asked by Songhak was, okay, how to do that, right? But there is still a grain of something new, right? So yeah, you know, when it comes to the humanities and human sciences, let's try to you know, to put ideas together, instead of saying that this one or that one is better than other. Right?
Yeah, I think they are I mean, of course, it seems more precise to speak about Capitalocene than to speak about Anthropocene with an A. I mean, because of course there are lots also of other hypotheses like Plantationocene and all these things. And I think that they are not like options between which we have to choose. We have to acknowledge that the situation is very complex, and there are multiple layers which led to this situation. But I just wanted to add one point about Stigler hypothesis, is really to speak of an Anthropocene with an E, like entropy, in order to focus, to point on this question of entropy. So I guess Jason Moore wants to point on the question of capital, whereas Stigler wants to point on the question of entropy, and saying that this is maybe the question for him is not like going beyond capitalism, but it's he would say maybe saving capitalism from its own auto-destructivity. You know, like we don't know what will really happen after, but the point is that something has to happen, and if something has to happen, something new, this is negentropy in a way, you know. So it's a more general perspective, which is just saying that if we are going towards the end, and if we want what he called a future to happen, you know, un avenir in French, then this is the first step. And then you have the question of what will be this future. Will it be capitalist? Will it be I don't know what? Will it be? You know, certainly we need a new category anyway. But the question is that first we have to fight for the possibility of a future arriving, and this is what a negentropy means in a way. So I guess maybe these are two not contradictory point of view, but, you know, some different point of view that you have to articulate together, I guess.
And I think he also suggests, this is how I feel him, that, you know, the end of capitalism will be very painful for us, right? Because of this self-destructive tendency of contemporary capitalism. So the question is how to make it less painful for people, for the biosphere, and so on. But, you know, at the end, for example, when Jason Moore says that capitalism is not only the economic system, but the system of organizing nature, this is actually Bernard Stiegler's point too. So I think that there is a lot of similarities between these two philosophers, in spite of the fact that they use two different concepts, right?
Okay, so someone sent us his article on many Anthropocene
Franciszek,
conceptions. So
I
thank you very much.
I quoted this article during the seminar on during our first seminar. Franciszek counted all scenes which are present in contemporary human sciences discourses, introducing his own, the Urbanocene.
Okay.
Which highlights the fact that the city is this main aspect of what we call Anthropocene. So,
but Bernard Stiegler was saying that we are living in an absence of epoch. So this profusion of names is certainly a symptom of we don't know how to name the epoch in which we are living. Because maybe there is no epoch in a way. Yeah. So we can maybe have time for a last question or remark or commentary, and then we will have to stop at 6 o'clock, I guess. I don't know if.
And because Bernard speaks of the absence of epoch, he does not say the Anthropocene epoch in relation to geological time scale, but he says the Anthropocene era, because it would be confusing, right, in relation to what he means by epoch.
Okay. If
I think we can stop here.
Yeah,
if
we can
you
stop
don't
here.
mind.
Yeah. Okay, ciao, Giuseppe. Thank you very much. So next time we will hear Giuseppe. We will speak about this question of entropy, negentropy, and anti-entropy in a more technical way, let's say, in
relation
yes.
to biology, I guess.
Yeah. So thank you very much. So see you in 1 month.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.